When studying history, especially the Great Conspiracy, the timeline is very important to put things into perspective and to help you understand where the internationalists are going. It is also important to view valid sources and not just interviews and documentaries, to compare them to each other and to use insight and critical thinking. Who is right and who is wrong and why? What evidence is reliable? And what are they omitting? The first reference I use is historyworld.net. They start off with the history of banking after the Templars. No mention of them at all. An example of how a valid source omits pertinent facts that conspiracy theorists and documentaries by, truthers and what have you, include. But later I will explore a certain issue that most conspiracy theorists are wrong about and the valid sources are correct about. So you have the Dukes of Florence, okay? Florence, Italy, the mafia. You had the Fuggers. They were in charge of the finances of the papacy and of princes. Then the Habsburgs rise to power in the late 15th century. So this is going back, 500 years plus. The Habsburgs loaned to the Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian. There were centers of trade later on, the late 1500s, 1600s. Amsterdam, Hamburg, and Nuremberg, where they had the Nuremberg trials. Sometimes these things are connected when you come across these interesting coincidences. Sometimes they're not. According to the letters from Nuremberg, I believe it's called, the reason why they had the Nuremberg trials there is because of so much of Germany was destroyed, and they had a building that was perfect for the trials at that location. The Bank of Sweden supposedly dates back to 1668 and is the world's oldest surviving bank. When you look at Sweden, right, there's other connections there that are key in the Great Conspiracy, such as the Berzelius Society. I believe he was a Swedish chemist that this society in Yale is named after. And there's a lot of connections I'm unaware of and that I don't have time to explore. I have to finish my top martial arts challenge. I have a ton of things to go over. I've been studying this for 20 years, and most of the research I've done, I don't know off the top of my head. Nobody's that smart. But yes, feel free to explore the connections there as well. The Bank of England becomes a factor, and they follow the Bank of Sweden before the end of the century. Another interesting fact I found was that in 1666, the earliest surviving banknotes date from Johann Palmstruck, who started Stockholm Banco, which issued more notes than the bank could redeem a silver coin. And so he was charged with fraud and given the death penalty. You see how serious this banking stuff is. Not only the date 666, right? Hey, the dangers. This is evil to do that. It's kind of like a symbolic numerology or what have you. It's evil to rip off a whole nation with an artificial system and then to use that system to take away the money, the goods, the land, the people. They become human resources, especially the most attractive women. Now, long ago, I would have killed these people for coming in, trying to take everything that matters, including and especially the most attractive women. But nowadays, people are under such heavy mind control that they just let them. So I have nobody to stand with me. So instead, I have to waste the best years of my life trying to explain to you why you should stand with me instead of going to fight the scum, the demonic garbage. You have no idea how painful that is. Never forget They did not want to help me fight these people. I had to convince them that they need to be fought. And I'm not saying I'm going to be violent or that violence is necessarily the answer. So there was a restriction period. The banks were getting out of control from 1797 to 1821. In 1821, the British government introduces the gold standard. Because there's this madness going on with silver coins and notes. William the Ninth, the ruler of the German... I'm kind of bouncing around. I apologize. I'm trying to breeze through this so I can make my point. And I'm running out of time already. William the Ninth, ruler of the German state, Hesse-Kassel, listens to Rothschild on finance and his art collection. This is key. You know how there's liberal arts. In San Francisco, the Art Museum, not just where the UN was founded, feminism, gay movement, Grand Lodge of Masonry in California, MK Ultra's main center, and on and on and on. You know, center of the Satanist movement, Temple of Set, Michael Aquino, pedophile rings, on and on and on and on. The Franciscans, but also liberal arts, you know, and these things all relate to liberalism, which comes from the Age of Enlightenment, which the Masons on record were responsible for. Now, during the years, Napoleon is unsettling the continent. Rothschild takes advantage, right? And many of you see Napoleon as a Mason. He had his hand in his coat in the typical Masonic fashion in the paintings, right? A lot of famous paintings of him. So this is when Rothschild really gets his rise, the family. And so Solomon goes to Vienna, Nathan Meyer to London, Carl in Naples, Jacob in Paris. And Nathan transfers an example of how they manipulate wars with their banking, and there's a countless number of examples. This is the one history.net, or excuse me, historyworld.net cites. Nathan transfers a large sum of money from London to Portugal to pay British troops in the Peninsular War. And the most famous was the Battle of Waterloo. The anti-Masonic party in America, because remember, the Battle of Waterloo is 1815, right? There's people who are catching wind of all this. They're like, look, we're sick of this Mason stuff. So the anti-Masonic party has about a 9-year, you know, adventure from 1827 to 1836. And lo and behold, within 30 years, within 3 decades, the Civil War after the anti-Masonic party is destroyed. So they stifled the dissent. They smashed the main opposition. They started the Civil War. Now, this is where many conspiracy theorists have it wrong. They say that Abraham Lincoln was going to issue interest-free greenbacks, and that's why he was killed. There's a grain of truth in that. He was having a disagreement with the bankers, like chasing them. But he had already issued millions of dollars worth of greenbacks. When he signed the first Legal Tender Act in 1862, remember, Lincoln wasn't assassinated until, I believe, 1865. Yes, April 14, 1865. So he had already, you know, issued a lot of these greenbacks. The largest amount of greenbacks outstanding at any one time was calculated at, whoa, $447,300,203.10. The Union's reliance. Okay, basically, let me go back a little bit. Okay, notes as a legal tender, the paper currency soon to be known as greenbacks. Legal tender status guaranteed that creditors would have to accept the notes despite the fact that they were not backed by gold, bank deposits, or government reserves, and bore no interest. This is key, okay? Because eventually, the end of the war found the greenbacks trading for only roughly half of their nominal value in gold. Because of the way he did it, they weren't worth as much as they were bought for. They were only worth half. So the people who bought these things, trying to be good patriots and whatever reasons they had, faced serious losses of money. They were trading for roughly half. So they're painting Lincoln as, and I'm not saying Lincoln is a bad guy, but they're painting Lincoln as this kind of anti-banker rebel, which is partially true. But when they say about the greenbacks, they're not entirely correct. One can make the argument that he was going against the National Banking Acts of 1863 and 1864, but these things passed before he was assassinated. These were two United States federal banking acts that established a system of national banks for banks and created the United States national banking system. And many people blame the legislations following this for the subprime mortgage crisis and economic collapse and what have you. The recent events, of course. All right, so I barely have any time. There's some Rockefeller quotes. I only have time to read one, and I'm going to explore it in a few minutes. Let's see how it goes. For more than a century, ideological extremists at either end of the political spectrum have seized upon well-publicized incidents, such as my encounter with Castro, to attack the Rockefeller family for the inordinate influence they claim we wield over American political and economic institutions, which cannot be achieved without having a relationship with the criminal underworld and the bankers. But we'll explore that in a second. Some even believe we are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists, and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure. One world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty, and I am proud of it. David Rockefeller, from his own book, Memoirs. Now, two things I want to point out, and I'll wrap this up. Number one, in order for the Jews, the Italians, the Templars, or anyone else to have a firm grasp on the banking system, not only to start to do it, but to maintain it, they have to have a certain relationship with the underworld and with the lawmakers. They have to play both sides. And in some cases, they're also playing the religious angle, managing the papacy's finances as well, as Roberto Calvi was doing, but we won't get into that. And that's another example of this. Okay, so these people are the most ruthless criminals on top of the criminal structure. They have to be, or else criminals will outmaneuver them and take that from them. It's the most desired position to be in a capitalist world, in a free market world, etc., is to control the finance and the monetary systems of nations. The most desirable position. What gang member wouldn't want to do that? What mafioso wouldn't want to do that? What corrupt politician, what greedy rodent wouldn't want to do just that? This is why Jesus said in Matthew, 19:23 and 24, what he did. I'm almost out of time. The other thing I want to bring up is in order to make a more integrated global political and economic structure, you have to control intelligence agencies. You have to control secret societies who make the philosophies that are then impressed upon society, and society are conditioned with these abhorrent, horrendous philosophies. You must control the think tanks, not just the money. That's part of how you control the money, is controlling the philosophies and the criminal element, the criminal underworld. Gang stalking is a symptom of a greater push of greedy people who value money over human life, and they've done it on record, according to valid sources, for over 500 years. It's the same types of scum. And these are the enemies of Christian values who gather together like rats in a fucking wall or something, in a hole, in a sewer. And of the rats in the sewer, the most deadly, meanest, the vicious, the alpha male rats were the people who controlled the money. And the gypsies, the pagans, the Satanists, the gays, the witches, and all the enemies of Christians, the scientists, the atheists, they are all forced to kind of bend to the will of the alpha male rats hiding in the sewer, plotting against the lion and his allies. Follow Jesus and not materialism. Thank you. A lot of you don't understand why I behave the way that I do. I'm drugged. My life is sabotaged. My family's turned on me. I mean, you have no idea what I've been through. So I'm going to use this guy. He's Max Lemon, an associate warden, and he's in court. Remember, these wardens and these police officers typically act as socially normative as it gets when they are in court, giving a statement. And watch carefully how he behaves. And think about how it makes you feel when you call out the system, knowing that everyone's going to turn against you and, you know, they're aching to get revenge on you. It's the natural response pretty much no matter how brave you are. I mean, it takes being brave to call them out. You know, for you to then act like nothing's wrong or, you know, not to change emotionally. You'd have to be a robot to not feel some type of way about what is most likely going to happen.
Atrocity and cover-up, and I would like to list them in order. Penal Code Section 118.1, a false report filed by a peace officer. Significance there is Captain Oliver F. Acuna, first-level reviewer of the use of force review, which was a clear conflict of interest based on his involvement at Folsom State Prison. Second, Penal Code Section 126, perjury. Third, Penal Code Section 129.
I knew the stress that he was under. I mean, there were people in that audience that he was going to make serious allegations against.
It's like there's police officers in this area and gang members and chemists and so on that I make serious allegations against publicly.
Penal Code Section 141B. Planting, altering, or concealing physical evidence. A misdemeanor for the general public. A felony for a peace officer. Captain Oliver F. Acuna was directed by Acting Warden Bonnell on the day of this riot to submit a document. That document was intentionally withheld, I believe, through a conspiracy of the warden Diana K. Butler, Mike Bonnell, and Oliver F. Acuna from 3 separate official investigations conducted by the Department of Corrections. Additionally, I move that this panel collaborate with federal officials and charge all CDC administrators that have had knowledge of this and did not act with federal obstruction of justice.
You see, the way I see myself is different than the way he sees himself. He sees himself as responsible to do this. He doesn't want to do it. He also knows they're going to give him a hard time. It's going to mess up his life and his career and his future. And this happened in 2004, mind you, in the same state that I'm in right now. With me, I see myself as a warrior and that I'm going to die for what I believe. And so I lash out with more anger. It's like these people are going to kill me for sure one day, one way or another. And I'm going to go out in a blaze of glory. And I really resent them for it more than you can imagine. They cost me my son and so much. When you consider the specifics, there is nothing about the way I behave that would imply anything other than I have a great amount of self-control and I manage stress better than most people, especially when you consider that I do not abuse substances and that I live a sober life other than what they're covertly drugging me with, which makes me want to lash out. Thank you.